Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of the Hero Academy. We have Brandon Griffith, current law enforcement, but you said reserve.
Yes, sir. The Reserve Deputy for Pinal County Sheriff's Office.
That's the county Mark Lamb runs.
Yes, sir. American Sheriff.
American Sheriff. Yeah, I follow him on Instagram. Um, he he seems like a cool dude. He's gotten very political lately. Is he running? Is he running for sheriff?
That's what happens when you run in there. He's running for Senate right now. So
Okay.
he's our current sheriff, but he's running for AZ Senate right now.
All right. Can you link us up so I can get him on the show?
Yeah, dude. Mark, he's good people, man. He's really down to earth. He just spoke for my nonprofit at one of our events and came and did a book signing along with Deputy One Timer, Chief Matt Thomas, who's the Mexican drug cartel expert. So both good
Uh,
guys who believe in the cause and want to save lives.
yeah, that's pretty cool. So on this show, I stay away from politics.
Don't
It's
blame you.
it's such a hot button issue, but I love to talk about like what you're doing outside of law enforcement. Your nonprofit. What's the name of it again?
Our nonprofit is Griffith Blue Heart Nonprofit. We're a
Griffith Blue Heart.
501c3.
And you put up the graphic before. You were saying it was actually your heart.
Yeah, so our logo, what started off originally as a tattoo as a tribute to my wife. When I was working for the state, they wanted me to help create an award for officers who saved people's lives in the line of duty with CPR and using an AED. And they wanted to name it after my wife and I, but I was like, I'm not into that. I don't want it to be called the Griffith Award or anything like that. But I said, let's do something for cops and call it the Blue Heart Award. And they said, well, I can't do that. Let's just do the Griffith Blue Heart Award. So it turned into that. And then when we started the nonprofit organization, we incorporated the logo, but it's got an anatomical heart because I'm a cardiac arrest survivor and my wife is also a cardiovascular perfusionist. So all she does is open heart surgeries. But the line in the middle of it is actually taken from the EKG strip from the medics when they shocked me back. It's my first heartbeat. So we got that in there. We also got St. Michael's Wings, who's a patron saint of police officers. So it started as a tattoo, then it became an award, and then we ended up using it for our company logo because it resonated with a lot of people. They loved it.
I love it too. It caught my eye as soon as it flashed on the screen. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Um, how old were you when you had that cardiac arrest?
I was 26 years old and just made my department SWAT team 2 weeks before.
Wow. So you were probably in decent shape too.
Yeah, great shape. 26 years old. I was a defensive tactics instructor, a field training officer. There was no stress, nothing. It's just one of those things that can happen to anyone, anytime, anywhere. And it was my number.
Wow. How tall are you and what was your weight back then?
So I am 6'4". Currently, I weigh 248 pounds. Back then, I was probably around the same, probably around 250 ish. Um, yeah, great shape, but everyone has these different conceptions about it. Anytime anyone hears cardiac, they think about heart attacks, they think about old men grabbing their chest. They don't realize that young athletic males, and particularly cops, are at the highest risk. I mean, we're at a 70 times higher risk than the general public, and it's electrical. It's not a clogged artery. It's not from eating too many cheeseburgers or having a sedentary lifestyle. It's an electrical misfire. Like plug in that Christmas tree, it shorts out on you.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
the weird thing about me and my story is that I remember every detail. Most cardiac arrest survivors, they get told about it later on. They wake up in the ICU, 5 days, couple weeks, couple months later, and their spouse is telling them about it. But I remember every detail going down, coming back. I don't know if it's just because I was predisposed and been through critical stress incidents. My body is used to the adrenaline dumps and the neurons firing, or if it's just because my wife literally started compressions the second I dropped. But I remember every detail if you want to hear all about it.
Yeah, I do want to hear about it because this is I thought about clogged arteries also, like as soon as you mentioned it, I wasn't thinking, misfiring.
So it's a big thing that's not really talked about. The cardiac industry has done a piss poor job of educating the public on what heart disease is. And heart disease is a blanket term, right? So that covers your heart failures, covers congenital defects, heart attacks, or also known as myocardial infarctions, and there's electrical complications that are called cardiac arrest. So a heart attack is 95% survivable, but it can go into cardiac arrest, which actually kills the patient. That's a plumbing issue where a section of the heart is clogged up. That's usually lifestyle based. And that's when people get stents in their heart or, they have the widow makers and all that stuff. Those things happen slowly. They're sweaty, they're palmy, they're having all kinds of chest pain, and then they usually drop. But cardiac arrest is like someone just flipped the light switch and bam, they're on the ground. They immediately stop breathing normally if they're breathing at all. It's like when we saw Damar Hamlin go down on the football field, or Christian Eriksen, the soccer player. They're standing there and all of a sudden they just drop. Someone turned the lights out on them. It's because their heart is in this deadly arrhythmia and there is no blood being pumped to the rest of their body. It's in this quivering motion, and if it doesn't receive compressions and a shock from a defibrillator, they can't go back to a normal rhythm. So they are medically dead at that moment. There's no blood circulating around their body. Their brain's not getting any kind of oxygen. And
Wow.
that's all those stories you see around the country. There's like, 20,000 something kids per year under the age of 18. All those stories you hear about high school athletes just dropping dead in the middle of track or swim or hockey or basketball. All those cops and military guys you see that are in perfect shape that just drop dead. That's cardiac arrest. And, even in our own community and law enforcement, they don't realize. I mean, Harvard Medical School did a study in 2014 that showed that we are at a 70 times higher risk than the general public. And for the general public, 1 out of 4 Americans has heart disease. So if you start looking at the numbers, you're like, crap, we're at a 25 times higher risk of dying from a heart complication than a violent encounter with a suspect. But cops are doing a piss poor job of taking care of ourselves. And the job and the marathon that we go through and put our bodies through over a 20, 30-year career is what's absolutely killing guys, which is why most guys drop dead within the first 5 to 10 years of retiring. They either have a heart attack, a stroke, a TIA, they go into cardiac arrest. This is what our number one killer is. It's not the suicides, it's not motor vehicle accidents, it's not violent encounters with subjects. It's heart disease, and it's not talked about. The IACPs and all these other meetings you go to, the health and wellnesses and all that.
I was just having a conversation with a guy who's retired from the GBI, and he was saying that he worked for Delaware for a short time, and he had this crazy schedule where it was 7 days on, 1 day off, 7 days on nights, 1 day off, and then or 2 days off or something like that. And then they came back for 7 days on of midnights, and then they'd have like 3 days off. And it was like, I'm like, who thought that that schedule was good?
Can't make
I
this crap up, man. Like, you see it all around the country. People have these crazy schedules. We're sleep deprived. Our
Yes.
endocrine systems are in overdrive. We got guys that are addicted to energy drinks and they just chug one after the next. We drink too much, we smoke too much, we're eating food at the gas station. Guys are working out at the wrong times, they're not taking care of. I mean, all these things compound over a 20-year career. And it's not the stress from just the traumas we see in the field. We all knew we were going to see that, but the administrative stress and the political nightmares and all the red tape we have to deal with as well directly contribute to us and our family lives. And it's detrimental to our health.
Is there any way to prevent or like a misfiring, or is it just one of those things that it could really literally happen to anyone?
Man, we're going to dive into it now. So there's a lot of things that can be prevented as well as lifestyle. But, most agencies have got programs. Most of the cops who get their physicals, but the turn your head and cough physical does not cover your heart. A simple EKG, most of us, if you go to a cardiologist and get a full cardiac workup, you're going to find something, especially if you've been on the job for 10, 15 years. Going and getting an actual heart check, doing stress tests, getting a calcium coronary check, getting ultrasounds, EKGs. That's paramount for cops that want to survive and detect anything. Because, especially for the electrical side, there are diagnosable electrophysiological diseases like long QT syndrome or Brugada or Wolf Parkinson's White. Those are things that they can detect and they can fix. I can't tell you how many times I do podcasts or I speak and I start talking about some of the things that guys get from the flutters in their heart to their heart racing out of their chest to the lightheadedness and feelings they get sometimes when they're working out. They're like, oh yeah, I have that too. I thought it was normal. No, it's not normal. Well, that's something that we as a community think is normal. But when you actually get checked out, these guys are having serious heart complications. I'll tell you, I got famous cops that do podcasts and shows that have called me and had to go get ablations done. And as soon as it was done, it's fixed for life. But other ones want to ignore the signs and bury their head in the sand, like, well, don't tell anybody I got this. There's such a stigma around it. It's like it affects 70% of our community, and we act like it's this big secret. Like, don't talk about it. But if we don't
When I
talk about
used
it,
to do a lot of overtime, I used to stay until like 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and I would feel those flutters and I would feel those. So I did get checked out for like calcium deposits. I never had a stress test, but I did get checked out.
did you ever see an electrophysiologist, or did you just see a regular cardiologist?
I went somewhere in New York City where they hook you up to a very special machine. And I don't believe I drank anything, but they were able to tell me that I was in the top percentile of like everything being clear and checked out.
So if you're having complications where you're still just be sitting there and I feel like your heart's racing out of your chest, you have those flutters, there's things called preventricular contractions and PACs as well that like 90% of the population get. But when it goes into clusters, that's when you have complications. When cops and firefighters and military members are sitting there and they're getting these clusters where you're like, oh,
Yeah,
that was
that's
weird.
bad.
And you have them stop. If you're holding your breath, if you're getting lightheaded from that, you are this close to having a cardiac arrest. Though when you start getting those clusters, you need to get hooked up, go see an electrophysiologist, wear a Holter monitor, get checked out because you're having an electrical misfire that could lead to a very deadly arrhythmia like ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation. And that's what happened to me. I had a ventricular fibrillation and I was dead for 16 and a half minutes before my wife and a fellow officer were able to save me.
Oh my God, you're so knowledgeable about this stuff. How long have you been studying? Was it after your heart attack, or like how long have you been studying all of these things about the heart?
And so heart disease has hit me in a way that most people will never understand, man. The first time I did CPR, I was in high school. I wasn't even a man yet. And then I lost a buddy in college who had electrical complication. He was a phenomenal wide receiver. He was at home for Christmas break and dropped dead. And everyone decided to wait for the professionals, and no one did shit. He died. And then I had an uncle go down from an issue that was unrelated, and then it actually took my life. But before I even got into law enforcement, I studied. I worked in the private sector. I became an EMT. So I started going towards back then. They had what's called an intermediate in EMT, which is just under a medic. You had to learn how to do EKGs and pharmacology and all that stuff. So I was studying that then before I got into law enforcement. Now, once I became a cop, man, I can't tell you how many times I've done compressions, on kids pulling out of the pool or people having cardiac arrest or on the scene of an accident. I lost count how many times I was doing this, but it wasn't until after my own cardiac arrest, which had no diagnosis, I had to go through and start figuring out, why did I die? Is this going to happen again? Am I going to pass on some unknown genetic trait to my kid? And during this time, my wife, after my cardiac arrest, started medical school. So while she was going through and studying to become a cardiovascular perfusionist, she was educating my knuckle dragon ass. So I was working with her. She was kind of helping me out. And then I started getting brought into the state and I started working for the Arizona Department of Health Services. And I started working with some of the most renowned cardiac researchers in the world. Guys like Dr. Ben Balbro, who created hands-on CPR with Dr. Kern at U of A. These guys started bringing me into the circle, and they're like, "Oh yeah, meet this guy from Japan, meet this guy from Norway. These guys are the leaders in their fields in this." So I started hanging around these guys, and if they were bringing me to share my story of survival and talk about law enforcement aspects, but you, like you said, if you're going to be a speaker, you better know your audience. So I can't go over there using generic terms for lay persons or first responders. If I didn't speak the language and look like I was knowledgeable in it, they wouldn't take me serious if I had anything to contribute. So I really had to hit the books and I had to study this. And I started going into research publications and diving into it. But I was that ADHD kid in class that was always in trouble, but I can hyper focus on things and I can get obsessive. So once I started diving into the cardiac stuff, especially after it took my life, I deep dove into all of this so I could be as knowledgeable as possible. So not only when I write articles, but also when I implement training programs and I work with experts to say, this is what I'm thinking and this is why. Let's talk about this. I know exactly where I'm going and how I'm going to take that direction. And that's something that kind of like a superpower. I know how to turn that on and off and I want to hyper focus on things. So that's kind of how I got into that.
That's a cool story. How many speaking engagements do you do a year, roughly? Do you know?
Oh man, I never tallied it up. I'm pretty fortunate the fact that people keep calling me to do this. It's not something I actively try to market or go after, but this year alone, we were at Axon Accelerate, IACP Health and Wellness. We did Blue Paws. We did 100 Clubs work. We did. I'm trying to think. I was spoke at the National Native American Law Enforcement Association. I do about a dozen or more podcasts per year. I usually try to do one or two a month. And then I've done
Well,
all the private stuff.
I'm honored that you came onto this one. Um, but I'd like to go back to the beginning of your speaking career. Like, did you hire a marketing agency? I'm curious to like your journey of how you actually got onto your first stage and you started to actually present to these different companies?
So mine was not your traditional route. The first thing I did was die and come back. So as soon as I survived my cardiac arrest, I was immediately labeled damaged goods. My police department, I was working for a municipal agency at the time. They labeled me damaged goods. They were like, "Get the hell out of here. We can't have a cop with a defibrillator in his chest. He's too much of a liability." And I'm sitting there going, "Wait a minute. We got guys that are 60, 70 pounds overweight. You got guys with insulin pumps. You got guys with all these other conditions that are ticking time bombs. I just made SWAT. I'm an FTO. I'm a defensive tactics instructor. I can outrun. I can outfight. I can outbench all these guys. And you're telling me I'm unfit for duty just because I have a medical device that may or may not shock me if I needed it?" I said,
Right.
"Bullshit." So I got pissed and I started going in. How do I fight the state? How do I fight risk management? How do I go back to my job? I was not going to take no for it. You're not going to cast me aside and tell me that I'm damaged goods. So I had to bring in researchers. And I started contacting people at the time. The state EMS and trauma director who ran all the programs for the state happened to be a cardiac arrest researcher and happened to be one of the creators of Hands-Only CPR. So when he reached out to me to do research on cardiac arrest, I said, "Look, I will help you if you will help me. I don't want to go back to work. How do I prove that I'm safer? If I'm not just as safe, I am safer than any cop out there. But right now, if you have a cardiac arrest on duty, you need CPR and a defibrillator instantly, and you still only have about a 10% chance of survival. Me, if I go down, I get shocked instantly before I even lose consciousness because of this thing implanted in my chest." And I can show you all the numbers and statistics for cops, but I had to prove that aspect in order to go back to the field and go back to full active duty. It took 6 months and I had to do a lot of fighting, but I was successful. And my assistant chief at the time, Mark Mann, had my back and I returned to full active duty. But when this happened, that cardiac arrest researcher says, "Hey, we're doing this event." He did a bunch of conferences per year for fire, for EMS, for hospitals. He also ran the CPR University at University of Arizona. He said, "Brandon, I want you to come speak for me." I said, "Hell no." I'm like, I'm a knuckle dragon operator. I'm a street cop. Like, you don't want me up there dropping F bombs. You don't want me up there running my ADHD mind off all over the place. No, I'm not interested." He goes, "Look, come out to this event. If you want to speak, speak. If not, just sit there and wave." I'm like, "All right, I can do that." Thanks to he helped me get my job back. I owed it to the guy, right? So I show up to this event and another cardiac arrest survivor was speaking, and everything she was saying resonated with me. I was like, "Holy crap." I didn't realize the mental health aspects and everything else she was going with. So I was like, "You know what? I can do this." So I got up and I shared my story of survival and I talked about what happened with me and my wife. And right afterwards, literally, this girl came up with her parents afterward and she goes, "Can I talk to you?" I said, "Yeah, sure." She had a congenital defect in her heart and insurance wouldn't cover her implanted defibrillator. So basically, she was waiting for the day she was going to die. And she says, "Can I talk to you about what you experienced in death? I'm just curious because it's probably going to happen to me." So I sat and I talked to her and her parents, and it was like this weight was lifted off her. And I was like, she heard her parents give me this big old hug, and I was like, "Holy shit, there's something to this public speaking thing. Like, if I can reach a couple people, there's something to it." So I started kind of what started with helping law enforcement do consulting and training, helping them implement policies and training programs, and helping them get grants for life-saving devices like AEDs and tourniquets and Narcan and all that stuff that we're currently using. I started speaking to agencies and sharing my story of survival. And it was like, "Hey, we're going to have this conference. Do you want to come speak over here?" Or, "Hey, we're going to be doing this event. How would you feel about doing this?" And then all of a sudden, when I started working in the cardiac community, I ended up sitting as the board member for several cardiac organizations. And then they were hosting events. And I started speaking at cardiac organizations and law enforcement events. And I just kind of rolled from there. And then all of a sudden, you got private companies calling me out to speak and talk to their sales teams and do this. And it just kind of it happened organically. It was not something I ever sought out to do. I was never like, "I'm
So
going to be
how
a
long
speaker."
would you say you've been a speaker?
If you want to say how long before I started accepting funds for it, or how I've been speaking for quite some time. I've been very comfortable standing in front of people. I mean, even before I was a cop, I'm an avid martial artist. I started training when I was 4. By the time I was in high school, I was teaching knife tactics to military, so I was very comfortable instructing and teaching military and police. I was a field training officer, a firearms instructor, so I got very used to teaching at the academies and doing field scenarios. But when it came to actually speaking and delivering messages, there's very different types of speaking.
Yes.
There's educational speaking, there's inspirational speaking, there's message, there's all kinds of different things you have to know. So I had to learn all these nuances kind of on the fly and go, "Okay, well, that worked, that didn't work. This worked for this audience. Don't say that to this audience." So I would say I probably began speaking in regards to law enforcement resuscitation and cardiac arrest realities, probably in 2014. So
Okay.
about 9, almost 10 years now. And then it wasn't until after we started doing the nonprofit, because before I wasn't doing it to make money. I was trying to help people and being able to convince cops to get their checks, to take care of themselves, to make changes, to implement life-saving programs. That was part of my mission, right? This is how I earned my second chance at life. So it was never about money. But once we started the nonprofit, I was like, well, hey, if you come speak to this, we'd like to donate to your nonprofit and we'll cover your travel expenses. And I was like, well, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, we could always use more support to buy cops replacement pads and batteries and training. Like, so then I started speaking and putting the funds into the nonprofit. So I just kind of it rolled from there. I'm not some big speaker, like, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman is a good friend and he's come and spoken for us. And, he does 200 something engagements per year. Like, I'm lucky if I do 6 to 12 paid speaking gigs per year, but it's
That's
nothing
not
crazy.
terrible. That's not terrible though. Do you put on your own events as well
We
for
do.
the nonprofit?
Yeah, so I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, we had our Shield of Hearts 23, and that's where Sheriff Lamb came and spoke for us. We was held at the Embassy Suites Biltmore. We do our silent auctions and our raffles, and we got sponsors, and we had it was catered by Arizona Barbecue Catering Company, and we do other events like carbine builders and mountain bike heart spikes, and we do working on a wellness event right now. It's going to incorporate yoga and heart checks and different resources for first responders, like different things like that. We try to keep it interesting because cops and firefighters and EMS, we don't ever want to spend money. We don't ever want to do anything. So if you don't make it cool and you don't make it worth their time, they're not going to show up.
You ever do hot yoga? Bikram hot yoga?
I am not, man. I have not tried that yet. Is it worthwhile?
I do it like once or twice a year. I like it. I'm not a regular. My girl's a nurse and she is a regular yoga practitioner. Every morning she's doing her stretches. That's not really for. I like to just go to the gym and throw weights around.
Dude, I
uh,
started getting into the hit workouts because the cardiac meds, they slow down your metabolism, they slow down your heart rate, they mess with sperm motility, they mess you up, dude. So I had to start doing high intensity interval training just to counteract that stuff. And then I started incorporating that with cold water immersion. And it's been
and the doctor said no problem. Now I would think the cold water immersion would slow your heart rate. Once you get used to it.
It's more for regulation of blood sugar. It's more for the muscle recovery, and it's more for mental stimulation and just doing hard, uncomfortable shit. It really helps out, especially after doing a intense hit workout. Being able to jump in my pool in the middle of winter and be able to sit there for 3 minutes or so shaking is it definitely helps in the recovery and it helps with the mental side of it too. You know what I mean? It's more on the
Yeah.
mental side, but yes, it's more for blood pressure regulation and it actually speeds up recovery. It doesn't so much slow your metabolism and all that. I mean, the ice, in theory, you would think it would slow that down, but the hit workouts actually increase it.
What state are you in now?
I'm in Arizona.
Okay, so when I think of Arizona, I think of the 100-degree day heat, right? We love Arizona, by the way. That's like top three of places we'd like to live. But we went in February and we were shocked at how cold it could get at nighttime. Like people don't realize, yeah, Arizona gets hot during the summer, but some of those nights can drop down to like ridiculous swings in temperature.
It's so different because when I go to the East Coast and I go places, you guys have all the humidity. It's a different kind of cold. But when you come out here, it's dry. And when you get
Yeah,
that dry cold, it goes to the bone. So, I mean,
yeah.
there'd be times out on patrol where it gets, especially out, I was working in a municipal agency with 680 square miles, and we had a lot of agriculture community in different spots. Man, when they got the dew point out there, you'd be in the 20s and you'd be freezing. You're like, you got to be kidding me. Like, it just goes through the bone. But I mean, really, yeah, everyone knows Arizona for the hot summers and whatnot, but really it only sucks for 3 months. Like in June, once it gets about June, July, August, yeah, it can get up to 120 something and it's all dry, but the rest of the year is phenomenal. Like, our winters, like right now today, the high is like 76 and the low is like in the low 50s. It's nothing crazy. Like, but when you
I
go up
know.
north, you can go up to higher altitude in Flagstaff where there's snowball and you can go skiing and snowboarding. You can go up. The great thing about Arizona is you can go an hour or two in any direction, I have a completely different change. I can go up to the Red Rocks, Sedona. I can go mountain biking. I can go to the sand dunes. I can go to the lake. I can go to the snow. Like you can do anything you want out here. You can go to the city life. Like that's what I love about Arizona. I was born and
Our
raised
last
out here.
trip, our last trip was to Sedona, and we drove over to the Grand Canyon. One of the waitresses said, "Don't get Red Rock fever," because they said, you want to move here.
Yeah, we trained and equipped Sedona Police Department. We just got $100,000 grant for Flagstaff last year. So we work heavily in northern Arizona. We're working with Coconino County Sheriff's Office. So I get up there as much as possible. I take my kids up there. We go rock climbing, we go hiking, we get out in the fresh pine air, and we love it, man.
So I went on one of the very best hikes I ever had was on South Mountain in Phoenix. There's this valley in there, and there was some guy that was just like kind of like jogging through there, and but there was a lot of other walkers too. That was one of the best hikes I ever had, and it wasn't too treacherous, it wasn't too crazy. But we were way up above the city.
Oh yeah, that's just South Mountain. That's popular. I mean, that's where the Phoenix Academy and the DPS Academy is at. So in the academy, you're running that mountain. You're running on South Mountain. You have the obstacle course set up there, and you're out there. They have the Hell Hill, all that stuff. So I mean, that's just it's a part of life. Like I literally outside my window back here, I'm up to the mountains right behind my house. So I always want to live close to the mountains, so I can walk from my garage and hop on my bike and go hit a trail. So I mean, that's one of the things I love about here is wherever you want to go, whether you want to be on the outskirts of the city, if you want to be out, you can be right next to a mountain and go hit it.
In April or May, I want to come out and take a hike with you, and you just show me some good spots. All right.
You ever been mountain biking?
I have. I actually was in the bike unit for 10 years, which I tell everybody was way too long. But I thought that I'd retire out of that unit because you got to do law enforcement, but you also got to do community things, and I got to wear shorts in the summer. So
Yo, that's a fun unit, man. Like we started our bike unit for our last agency, man. We started working with our community action team. So we had guys setting up stings and actually sneaking up on dudes and bikes, on drug deals, on vehicle stings. Like it wasn't just what you picture bike cops doing. Like it was
right.
fun stuff, and like people don't realize how badass some of those guys are.
Yeah, I love the bike unit. Mostly because the training that we went to was like one of my very best weeks on the job when you went to bike school and we did mountain biking. We did a few different types of environments. We did mountain biking, we did a parking lot, we did some stairs, city environment, and then we did some trails. Like two of the days were trails. And that was one of my very best days on the job. Did you have a favorite unit that you worked in? And you worked for two departments, right? Or two or three?
Yeah, I've been really fortunate, man. When I started my career, this was in the recession, and I worked for an agency that was in the midst of a huge growth for our city. I mean, at the time, the municipal agency I worked for went from like 12,000 people to like 100,000 people. So I went from being on a
Wow.
squad of like three guys to all of a sudden we got 8, 9 man squads with 680 square miles. So it was like, hey, you're going to go to FTO school. I'm like, I've only been on for like 2.5, 3 years. What do you mean I'm going to FTO? I'm not ready to be an FTO. They're like, we don't have a choice. We don't have enough guys. You're better than the other options. Go. I was like, okay, you get voluntold. Like, hey, you're a martial artist. You're going to defensive tactics instructor school. Hey, you're great at firearms. You're going to be a firearms instructor. So I was like, okay, I got thrown into a lot very quickly. Where most guys, you have to earn it. You have to be around for 5, 7, 8 years before you even get an opportunity to go to some of those units. I was voluntold into them, and I started being like, all right, this is cool. So we had to even start our own units, like our criminal apprehension unit was called the community action team, and we were a very proactive agency, so we were able to on double squad days we put together this unit that would switch out with other people and teach them how to do plainclothes operations. So we would set up stings for bikes and laptops and fake guns and vehicles and wait for people to break into them. We would go after we'd go warrant hunting, we'd go
That's
after
cool.
drug houses, like, but it was guys on patrol that would double squad days and we rotate out so guys could be able to join the unit. They have to test to be into it and they go back, and it was such a blast because you got to be really creative, and you start using guys with different resources that knew how to
Was
use.
that your favorite? Was that your favorite unit?
You know what? Like what surprises me is I never really wanted to be a field training officer, but I think my favorite was probably being an FTO. I never thought I didn't want to do it. I got voluntold into it, and as soon as I started becoming an FTO, I realized the impact you can make on people for their entire
Huge.
career.
Huge.
and you set the tone for the culture. And being able to see those breakthroughs, and you had guys that came through, or young gals that maybe weren't comfortable with their combative skills, taking them, going to the mat, taking them on the range and getting them proficient, then watching them use it on somebody and watching that eureka moment when they're like, holy shit, this works, and I just knocked that guy out. Or, hey, I'm understanding this now. Being able to see them do their first, like, go code 3 for the first time and all that, like, it was so rewarding. I really, really enjoyed that. Now that I'm in the training division with Pinal County, I love, my bread and butter is high performance resuscitation, teaching you that. But it's weird because I'll go from the firearms and DT side. One day I'm teaching you how to stop threats and take lives, and the next
Yeah.
day we're teaching you how to apply tourniquets and do high performance compressions and apply AEDs and save lives. And it's like, it's that life and death dichotomy.
Most people don't realize that officers are trained to do that after they've stopped the threat. It actually surprises a lot of people that, and it surprises officers too, that, you go into that mode of, oh my God, I just like, you're still in shock of what just happened, and now you have to try and save that person.
Not just
It's
that, but we are on scene first 90% of the time to all this shit. I mean, if you look at the numbers alone, last year we had 1,176 fatal police shootings, right?
Yeah,
107,000 Americans died from drug overdoses. 42,000 Americans died from motor vehicle accidents. 60,000 from uncontrolled bleeding, and almost 700,000 Americans died from heart disease. The reality is we are more likely to save lives than we're ever going to have to take it.
yeah,
You
I
started
know.
going on. We're on scene first, pulling kids out of pools. We're on scene first on motor vehicle accidents, slapping tourniquets on people. With suicide attempts, we're the ones that are plugging up bullet holes. We're the ones that are taking care of the overdose patients using Narcan. We beat fire and EMS 90% of the time, and we're usually on scene in the first 4 minutes, where you
They
have the
hate
highest likelihood of
they hate the
resuscitation.
term second responders.
They are the second responders, man. You look at NFPA standards. I mean, they have their goal is 6.5 minutes, 90% of their calls, and none of them are at. You start doing public records requests. Fire and EMS, our system is not set up to succeed. Like, for instance, when I had my cardiac arrest, I lived half a mile from the fire station. You figure anything ever happens, I'm good to go. Well, those guys were on a call. They were with the diabetic patient, right? They can't toss them a Snickers and be like, hey, good luck. We got to go to somebody else. So the next closest unit got dispatched. Well, they were on a car accident. So the next closest unit got dispatched. It took them 9.5 minutes to get to me. So my wife and the first officer that got on scene were doing compressions on me for 9.5 minutes before the first crew arrived and were able to start dumping drugs and doing O2 and all the fun stuff. So, I mean, it's just, we're on scene first and we're set up to succeed. We're not 4 guys on one truck or 2 guys on the ambulance responding. You got squads, you got a whole army of cops. And unlike fire and EMS, if I'm on some bullshit barking dog call or some shoplifting and someone's dying across the street, I'm required to break. So that's
Right.
where cops are making the biggest difference. We have more life saves from drug overdose reversals and more life saves from bleeding control than fire and EMS combined. When we start getting all these cops AEDs and high performance training, you're going to see survival skyrocket like you've never seen before. We just got to get more agencies to buy into it, because back in the day, it was, we're cops, we're not firefighters. Well, no, we're not. But I'm already doing compressions on your kid that collapsed at basketball practice. Why not give me the tools to save his life?
I once heard us described as the Swiss Army knife of public servants. You really do everything you just described. We're out there pulling kids from pools, doing CPR, saving people from gunshot wounds, and
Talking people off of bridges. I mean, you
yeah,
everything. You got to be a counselor. You got to be a social worker. Oh wait, man, this guy's going crazy. How do we turn the power off to this thing? You have to know basic instruction. Like, you have to know math. You have to know everything in order to do this job at the basic level. Like, even if you want to become advanced in different things, you want to go into like SWAT operations. You got to learn whole other skill sets.
that's why I believe that first responders and the second responders. Yeah, that's why I believe that we're natural problem solvers, and we can transition into coaching and training so easily because we are natural problem solvers. So that's why I have that belief that we don't realize the skills that we have from the job. So many people think that being a security guard is their only, or starting a security guard agency is their only option, or going into real estate because they have so many contacts with people. But there's so many other options out there. There's someone out there that teaches going from cop to corporate world, which I don't know why anyone would want to do that after being independent. and then going into corporate war. I used to think that I wanted to become a teacher because I do enjoy teaching. But the more I thought about it, the closer I got to retirement, I was like, I'm going to teach on my own terms. I don't want to be stuck in a classroom. I thought I was going to be a history teacher because I enjoy history and I enjoy social studies. They came naturally to me. Those were the easy subjects for me. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, I don't want to be stuck in a building somewhere, for 8 hours and having to answer to parents and students.
Dude, I'll tell you what gets most of us is there's a culture shock and there's a huge shift in mentality and work ethic. It's not like what we've been used to for decades. So when you transition out and you start going to the corporate or the civilian world, man, a lot of guys it's sink or swim. Because I mean, yes, we have different skill sets and we're very good problem solvers, but can you operate in that in different environments? Like, when it comes down to when it's all about money or it comes about quotas or it comes about office and woke policies and stuff like that, cops don't do well in a lot of those environments. So they have to learn and pick and choose where are they going to go, what are they going to say? Because I mean, even for me, man, I figured when you're a first responder and you're in public safety, it's on a mannequin and go, you're certified, get out of here, right? There's
You over
nothing.
there, you call
What's
911.
yeah, all those videos are BS and they're designed for bystanders, and we're not EMTs, we're not medics, we don't have the same standard of training and care, but we're also required first responders. We have to provide medical aid. So we fall smack dab in the middle of that, and no one knows what to do with us. Most agencies don't have a direct relationship with the medical director. Most of them don't do high performance training. It's like you see those training flaws when they actually have to use a tourniquet on somebody when they're wound packing. They just put a piece of cloth over and press hard. You're like, no, you have to get in the wound and stop the bleed. Like, pack that shit in there. Teaching them different realities of medical response, they suck at it. So we had to create our training program from scratch and bring in different experts. And we incorporate tactics and evidence preservation, and we do all reality based training. So we got role players, we got bleeding simulators, we got evaluators going at you. We do TCCC and officer down with sims and blanks, and we make it as real as possible so we can actually teach you guys how to thrive in that environment.
When I was on patrol, we didn't have tourniquets. We had O2 packs and AD packs. and if and for most cases, it was throw some O2 on them and wait for their EMS to show up, wait for the fire department. And if it wasn't that, then I just was kind of twiddling my thumbs, waiting for EMS. Actually, a couple of guys and gals got in trouble for that recently because on body cam, they're kind of standing over someone that's having a situation, and I think the person expires and dies, and they got in trouble because they didn't take action.
These ambulance chasing attorneys are suing cops left and right for negligence and failure to provide aid. And it's not the cops' fault when their culture. I'll tell you, man, I consult all around the country, and you got chiefs of police and you got command staff members that go, if I wanted to be a firefighter, I would have put in a different application. And we don't do that shit. I tell my guys not to provide aid. I'm like, well, great, chief. You just inherited all that vicarious liability because the law in your state requires you to provide aid. If you're telling your guys not to do that, you just absorbed that. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Our public, especially now, there's the body cameras documenting you. If you're standing on scene doing jack and shit, you're gonna get sued in court.
Yeah.
And the problem is that guys aren't getting good training. Some firefighter comes in and shows you how to put a tourniquet on, and that's your training if you have that. Some guy comes in and teaches you how to do compressions from an American Heart or Red Cross, civilian program, and they're like, "Hey, you're good, right?" And you go out there, and that mom hands you that blue baby and expects you to save the
Yeah.
day. It's a different game, and you're like, "Oh, wait a minute, am I doing back slaps? No, that's for choking. Is it one finger? Is it one hand? Is it two fingers?" We don't want guys questioning that reality when someone's life is actually on the line. And most of these programs don't meet those needs. They're not searching patients. We got EMTs getting stabbed all around the country because cops aren't searching people before they throw them in the back of an ambulance. They're not looking for drugs. They're not taking care of all the things we normally do as cops. It's so segregated. This is medical versus this is criminal. And that's bullshit. When we're cops and we're on scene first, it all blends together. We have case
Yeah.
law to support it. We have high performance training. We have stress inoculation. We spend all this time on the range doing force on force and low light, and we do sim rounds, which is great. I'm a fire instructor. I'm all about that. But when it comes to our life saving skills, how often do you guys train out there? How often do you go to CPR or stop the bleed class? Every 1 to 5 years, maybe?
Yes. Yes, that's what I was gonna say. 1 to 3, 1 to 2 years. If you're, I think they have to recertify for EMT once a week every year, but sometimes
I'm
it
not talking
doesn't
about
work.
EMTs. I'm talking about line level patrol guys that are actually there first, having to deal with somebody who's bleeding to death that just slit their neck or slit their wrist.
All of our officers are EMTs also.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, yeah, we have a pretty large department and they're all EMTs. So
You
they
guys are
do
ahead
have
of the game.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They're and they have a medcat unit as well. So they have one guy out there who's almost a paramedic, basically. So yeah, we're definitely ahead of the game. Um, I know there's some smaller departments that it's not like that at all.
I'll go to some places that after they graduate the academy, they never train on it again. They
Oh,
don't
that's
have
bad.
EMT training. They don't have anything. And it's like, hey, you're expected to save someone's life, but we're not going to give you any training. We're not going to give you any equipment. And these guys are responding to gunshot victims. They're responding to motor vehicle accidents and motorcycle amputations. Like all these different crazy things are happening in front of them. They're expected to save a life with almost no training and no resources, which is
It's the
why
same. It's the same with defensive tactics. If you trained for 4 weeks in your academy, let's just say you got a massive 4 weeks or a massive 6 weeks, and then you never train a day again for your whole career. 4 years later, you're rolling around with someone, you're not going to remember the technique that you learned in the academy.
no. And if you
That's
don't
not muscle memory.
they're perishable skills, and you have to understand how you're going to operate and how you're going to shut people down and when to use different escalations and when not to. These guys don't study it, so why you see all these cops getting hurt, you see all these guys not knowing how to perform. We've got a real leadership crisis, and everybody wants us to do everything, but they don't want to give you the training for it. And we have to prioritize life and death. So that means your medical calls, that means your defensive tactics, your firearms programs, the stuff that have the highest risks.
I want to respect your time because I appreciate you hopping on, and I'm gonna end with my regular last 5 questions that I ask everybody. What's your definition of a hero? I know it's a tough question.
Someone that's willing to go above and beyond regular means to actually help somebody. I mean, that could be, it doesn't have to be, jumping in, going into a burning building, but going out of your way to help somebody who can never truly pay you back.
And when you're starting to feel stressed out, how do you relieve the stress? How do you save yourself, or how do you show yourself love?
Masturbation. No, I'm just kidding. I saw your face on
You're,
that one.
you're the first
No,
one that gave that answer.
come on now. You gotta lighten this up, man. Everyone goes so
Actually,
serious.
there might have been another woman that might have said something similar.
And I got to be careful because I'm a CEO. I run a nonprofit. People be like, "What did he say?" No, for when it comes to
Elon Musk was smoking weed on the Joe Rogan podcast. So while being the CEO of two major companies, and none of his board liked it. And you know what? He got so much press from it. So you be you and don't worry about
no, but for
everybody.
real, I love mountain biking. Anytime I can get outdoors and hit the trails, mountain biking is where it's at. My family time, man. I have 2 kids. My wife is incredible. Once I get to hang out with them, do a little decompression, throw the phone aside and go out with them. It's a good day for me, man. Plus, I'm a comic book nerd. Being able to read Ninja Turtle comics with my son, or being able to watch the cartoons or something like that, like that's my happy place when I can hang out with the family or go outdoors or go shooting or do something fun like that. That gets my mind disconnected from all the noise.
So when my kids were coming up, we would watch DBZ or Avatar, the last style vendor, not the style vendor, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I
the
got you.
last
I got you.
the last Avatar. I'm confusing UFC. I'm a huge UFC fan. So we would watch the last Airbender, and now with my girlfriend's kids, we watch Clone Wars on Disney
There you
Plus.
go.
So
Nice.
there's like 7 or 8 seasons of it. So there's so many episodes that we just sit down to a few episodes of that every night. I'm a huge comic book, not comic book, the comics, but comic book movies. I love everything Marvel, everything DC, even the ones that they say aren't that great. I still love them. I eat them up, and that brings me to my uh second to last question for you. What's your power today? You had mentioned it in the beginning of the show, like in the middle. You said, what's your greatest ability?
Definitely
You
being
said
able to
something
get
was your
hyper focused.
superpower.
Yeah, being able to get hyper focused because I am that diagnosed ADHD kid. I was every teacher's nightmare growing up. Like, but when I get fixated on something that I want to learn or something I'm passionate about, I go at it like a rabid dog. Like I will just dive into it and I can't lose interest. Like I will read every study, every publication, I'll watch videos, I'll talk to the experts. Like I will chase after things when I'm passionate about it, whether that be tactics or martial arts. Like I'm a lifelong martial artist, or whether I'm going after resuscitation stuff and learning about heart disease. Like I
What
will just
style? I Now that leads me to two questions because I'm just curious. What styles of martial arts did you study?
So growing up, I was in Horangdo, which was founded by Dr. Jusung Lee and Jubong Lee. I trained out of them, which came out of the Shilla dynasty. And then I also, once I got into martial arts, or sorry, once I got into law enforcement, I started training with, at the time, Craft International. Rigo Durazo is their combative instructor. And once I started getting into Kali and Silat from the Seka system, I was just like, holy shit, I've been doing everything because martial arts to civilians and everything has been so desensitized over the generations. You start looking at all these guys are adopting BJJ and Muay
Yes.
Thai and MMA because you're actually testing it against real people. But it's not true violence where you're actually trying to take somebody out. When you're talking about really
Right.
shutting down a human being, it's a whole different ballgame. When you're talking about neck breaks and taking out people's eyes and taking out genitals, and it's a whole different thing when someone's really trying to
Krav
kill you.
Maga. Krav
Your
Maga
Krav
is becoming
Magas, your Muay
popular.
Thais, all the BJJs, and once I started getting into Kali and Sila, and being okay, now I can translate these 20 years, 25 years of skills that I built up from the time I was 4. The streets became my lab. I was like, okay, now that I've learned how to do these cross best checks and I learned how to use the proper body mechanics, how do I make this joint lock that I used to love work in an actual combat situation when someone's flailing at me high on meth or on bath salts back in the day? That's what it was.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
was like, how do I make this work? So it became my lab, and I'd call my guru and be like, hey man, I just did this. I totally knocked him out by doing the vagus nerve strike. I did this, and you start figuring it out and studying things like Wing Chun and all that. You get a whole different perspective when you start studying other arts. But so many guys just get fixated on this is my thing, and I'm going to do this judo. I'm going to do this Muay Thai stuff. But then when their world crumbles when you put a different style of pressure on it. When you start seeing that someone's got a different level of intelligence, you start tweaking it, their
I
world
say
crumbles. And they're like,
I'm a
shit.
huge fan of wrestling, huge fan of BJJ, huge fan of uh all martial arts really, but I do want to do Wing Chun just as I'm getting older. I don't like being tossed around on the mat so much anymore. So I just want to keep my body as fresh and as young as humanly possible.
Once you learn the body mechanics side of wrestling and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and you start learning how to do judo and throws, like strikes become easy, right? Being
Well,
able to
I
actually
no,
incorporate that with it.
I like boxing, but I don't like getting hit in the head.
But I remember just talking to Rigo Durazo, training with him, and I remember being like, "Oh, I'm gonna try this. This is what BJJ does," and he's like, boom, and he headbutts me. I'm like, he let go, and I'm on the ground. I'm like, you know what? If they allowed headbutting in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, it would be a completely different thing. Like you start looking at it going, holy shit, as soon as they try to wrap you up, if you're actually destroying people's teeth and breaking their noses, it's a whole different ball game. And it's like, I guess I can't do that move on somebody who's high on meth that actually wants to hurt me because the first thing they're going to do is lock up or bam. And you're like, it only takes you to get busted in the nose one time to realize that I'm not going to do that when I'm actually fighting somebody again. I'm going to shut
Well,
them down in a different way.
I wouldn't recommend the guard being on bottom. You're talking about the guard specifically.
Oh yeah, I
I
was just
wouldn't
giving you some
recommend the
examples.
guard for anybody in a whether it's law enforcement or anybody being in a true fight. Like the guard is good for sport, but being in a true fight, I wouldn't recommend anyone being on bottom because that's where you're going to take the greatest amount of damage. And so my son wrestled. All three of my sons wrestled from kindergarten on. And I always told parents, "Hey, if you don't want your kid to get bullied, put them in wrestling." I am a
Nope.
huge fan of wrestling. My neighbor was a county champion, and I think he might have been a state champion, but he was just a really good wrestler. Tall, lanky, skinny, and he would do all kinds of things to cut weight, like throw up and make himself throw up. Crazy things to cut weight. He cut a tremendous amount. It wasn't really healthy for him.
Yeah.
But that being aside, I love wrestling. I love BJJ. I love the stand-up martial arts as well, because where does everything begin? It begins on the feet. So I am a huge fan of all martial arts. I tell everyone, like, you have to train in something. You cannot just think that the training that you got 2 years ago, 3 years ago is going to kick in when you need it. You have to be prepared for those situations. You have to be mentally prepared, and then you have to be physically prepared for those scenarios that might come up. But
You got to find out what works for you, because you know what works for somebody else may not work for the next guy. Some people like boxing, some people like
right.
wrestling, some people like this. If it works for you and you're proficient in it, keep it up. Like,
So for boxing, I just like the defensive movements. I want to know how to roll my shoulders, the Floyd Mayweather style. Roll a punch, pull from the punch when it's just inches from your face. I want all of that to be second nature, so that I watch this guy I watch a couple of videos on YouTube where the guy is just like giving random people gloves, and he's like, hit me if you can. And he puts his hands behind his back, and he's just rolling with everything, and he's just watching, and he's just moving his head. And sometimes he might, like, if someone's pretty good, he might have to put up a block and parry their hand a little bit. That's for someone that's throwing straighter punches. You might have to parry a little bit, but I just love all of those defensive. And they usually say, "Hey, don't try this in a real fight. This is just for demonstration." It, but I love those videos where you see people just moving defensively and showing that if you get good at that one skill, you're actually very hard to hit. Anderson Silva was one of my Anderson and George St. Pierre. I love those two uh, for the way that they fought. George combined karate with wrestling, and also he was a complete mixed martial artist, but he really combined the karate, distancing, and the timing
and
with
creation, the French wrestling and stuff, right? And strikes, yeah.
the wrestling. He combined it so well. And Anderson had that head movement. He had it down so well that he looked like he was in the Matrix. He looked like he was like doing stuff that like, oh my God, how does he move like that? So I've just like I've been a huge combat sports fan since the days of Mike Tyson and just going out there and obliterating people. Mike Tyson would use that peekaboo in and out. You know what I mean?
Oh, dude,
I
I
really
still I quote him all the time, man. I still love his. Everyone's got a
everyone's
plan
got
till
a
they get punched in
plan
the face. Like I
till they
love
get
that
punched in
one.
the face. And then my I that's one of my top favorite quotes. And the other one by Carlson Gracie is, you punch a black belt in the face, he becomes a brown belt. You punch him again, he becomes a blue belt.
I like it. I like it.
You keep punching him, they become a white belt. That's Carlson Gracie. So yeah, I'm a huge fan as well. Back to the mountain biking. I'm afraid of anything that can like break bones. So like if I do happen to hop on a bike, you got to take it easy on me.
So there's
We
different
can't be
styles, man. You
Yeah, I was gonna
got
say we
technical
can't be going
trails, you
down
got downhill, like
we can't be
this
going
cross
down a
country.
double black diamond.
No, no, no. We can take you across, the cross country style ones and do some leg burners and do some slow descents and get you comfortable with it, man. I don't ever take somebody out there that's not comfortable with mountain biking and be like, all right, we're gonna bomb down this cliff. It's like,
We're
no,
gonna go down this double black diamond down the side of this mountain. Go, let's go.
no, no. You can't do that, man. That's how people get killed.
Yeah, that's why I don't ski, I don't snowboard, and I don't go down the sides. We last time we were in I want to say Phoenix. It might have been Sedona. We saw this guy on a mountain bike and he went up the double black diamond, and it said this trail is not for beginners. And she's like, well, we're walking. She's like, how hard can it be? Next thing we know, we find ourselves on the side of a mountain. And I'm like walking sideways, and I'm like, this was your idea. And I'm giving it a death stare, and I'm like, I'm gonna kill you.
I love going up there, man. Every time I go up there to work, we always try to go mountain biking in Sedona area, man. It's a fun spot.
Yeah, we love Sedona. We really love Phoenix. Phoenix is not that it's a very spread out area, but the city itself is not very big, right? Like you can
No,
drive
when it
through.
comes to square miles, we're like second in the country for square miles. We're spread out, man. That's the nice thing about it is you don't have to. You can go downtown and do all the congestion stuff, but like anywhere in the valley, man, you can go to Tempe or Scottsdale and do
Right.
any of the city life you're into. You don't have to just go to one spot like in certain cities around the country.
Yes. Yes. All right, my last question for you, and I'll let you go because I really respect your
I can't believe
time.
you didn't want to hear the story, man. Every podcast host that usually contacts me for my story of survival. We hadn't even touched it yet, but all right.
Yeah, no, you touched on dying.
All right, yeah. Most people are like they want the story, and I go through that. You're the first host that hasn't had me open with it.
No, no, because you know why? I try to keep it more conversational and just like talk about, you know, I don't want to bring you on and have you talk about the same thing that you like. It gets boring for you as the
I'm with you,
guest.
man. It works for me. I like it.
So like I like to find things that we love in common. So like we love martial arts, we love comics, we love law enforcement, and we love the people, the men and women that do the job. We actually love those people. So like that's where I differ. I don't want to just talk about you dying. I want to talk about the positive impact that you're making right now after the fact. Um, do you have a training that you just brought me to another question that I was wondering. Do you have a training company? Like how do you make money with a non when you have a nonprofit, it's not supposed to make money. How do you actually support your family and and actually make money to do the things that you need to do?
A couple things. One, nonprofit does not mean that you do not generate revenue. Nonprofit, you have to be able to pay for your electricity. You have to be able to pay your instructors and contractors. You have to be able to pay for marketing. You have to be able to pay for your websites and your SEOs and all the things that make an organization work. Just because you're a nonprofit does not mean that you cannot charge for services and trainings, right? So we have multifaceted approaches to it. When it comes to the nonprofit side, we had to learn all of this as we go. We had to learn from the other consultants and people that work in the nonprofit space. But so we do multiple aspects like grants. So like we for last year we applied with Health First Foundation Northern Arizona. We got a six-figure grant to fully prepare, train, and equip Flagstaff Police Department for emergencies. So we did their dispatch protocols. We helped them with their policies. We helped them with the chain of command, the sustainability plan, their reporting, their medical direction, their legislation compliance. We trained all of their officers. We took, several different days. We went up multiple times and we trained all of them in high performance resuscitation training. So grants are one way, but we also sell our training program. I have to be able to pay for replacement pads and batteries and tourniquets that wear out. We have to pay for our travel costs and our hotels, and we have to pay for all these things. I have to pay these guys that are taking time from their families, from their streets, from their firehouses, or whoever we're employing them from to come be my instructors and evaluators. So we can charge agencies. We can also do fundraisers. We work with sponsors. We work with, we have coffee with Real American Heroes Coffee, and the proceeds from that goes towards our training programs. There's a whole bunch of different ways, man, but we also do consulting and services. So when agencies say, hey, man, we got AEDs, but the program we never gets used. Well, are you being dispatched to them, or does it go to fire and EMS, and maybe they might ask you to show up? Oh crap. The little things like that, being able to do consulting and sit down with them and say, this is what we recommend. This is how you get your program in compliance with legislation. Because most police department AED programs, the AED guys will come in and sell you an AED and move on to the next one. That program fails in the next 2 to 4 years because there's no medical direction. They didn't register them with the state. There's no tracking. There's no reporting. There's no nothing. And the program falls flat on its place and people are getting sued because they just half-ass it. It's not a band-aid. It's not a tourniquet you're going to put in the back of your car you may or may not use. You're responding to life and death emergencies all the time. Sorry, looks like you want to ask a question.
No, 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 no. I was gonna say we talked about certain people that just want to make a sale and just, then they move on to the next place, to the next place, to the next place. Whereas you're actually training agencies to be in compliance and to use the machines.
Well, law enforcement is such a unique space, and you know this inherently. Like when you start looking at other industries and you have civilians running it, they don't understand how you operate. When you got a fire guy trying to tell you how to do your SOPs, he's never been in the shit. He doesn't understand the difference. They're focusing on the medical side of it, which is great, but you're not going to tell you a fire. You're not going to let a firefighter tell you how to pie a door, are you? You're not going to let a firefighter come in and tell you how to respond to an active shooter, right? Why are we
Right.
having them come in and tell us how to do these situations? When I'm doing CPR one-handed on an overdose patient, his uncle's in the room who I arrested 2 months ago with a felony warrant, and the fire guys are talking to me going, "Which house is it? I'm doing it one-handed." It's a different ball game that they haven't prepared for. So I mean, we have to do things that are for law enforcement, and these organizations that come in and try to teach you in civilian, you call 911, you get an AED, have no touch in what law enforcement actually does, and they're designed for bystanders. And the programs fail for us, and cops don't take it. And we go in there and we grab ass and play around, and nobody pays attention to the video. Take 30 seconds because we have to. We do the box check and we move on. And then all of a sudden, when it's your son or your daughter that collapses, or when you're in the shit and your buddy's been shot and hypovolemia induces cardiac arrest and you don't have an AED and you're doing compressions on them and fire and EMS refuse to come in because it's not safe for them, what do then? You watch your buddy
You
die.
you piqued my curiosity. What is your signature story?
so like I said, I was 26 when I had my cardiac arrest. My wife makes fun of me. I've been shot at. I've been in knife fights. I've been in, I've been trapped under a vehicle in water rescue,
Oh
and
my
I died
God.
at home reading a book. Like you just never know when your time is up, right? So I remember sitting with my wife and I put my book down and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna take the dog out." I took 2 steps towards my den door and it was just like, you ever have someone jump out and scare you, in your heart?
Yeah.
It's that
Yeah.
flutter. Imagine that, but you can't recover from it. You can't take your next breath. So I have this electrical storm thing going on in my heart, and all of a sudden I can't breathe. Even though most cardiac arrest survivors don't remember their incidents, I remember all of this, and I had time distortion. In critical stress incidents, weird things happen, right? You get auditory exclusion, you get tunnel vision, loss of fine motor skills. I had time distortion where everything just slowed way down. And I remember just bearing down, going, "Oh, that's not right." And I remember trying to force myself to breathe. And I was like, "All right, do combat breathing, do box breathing, lower your respirations rate." Well, it turns out when you're in ventricular fibrillation, when you're in cardiac arrest, there is no blood being pumped to your lungs. The alveoli cannot expand with oxygen. So I was in agonal breathing, going,
Oh my
trying to
God. So
force
you
myself to
couldn't
breathe.
even call 911 if you wanted to.
I couldn't do it. No, mind you, I collapsed in about a second and a half of this happening, so I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even get my phone out of my pocket before collapsing. But everything just felt like slow motion to me. My wife turns around, sees my face as the darkest purple she'd ever seen, like someone choked a Smurf. She sees this, pulls out her phone to call 911 as I collapse into my bookshelf. This is not the one behind me. This is at a different house. She goes to kind of brace me. Now I'm 6'4", my wife is 5'3", so I topple right over her and I slam my head through the wall and I land on my hands and my knees. But you got that warrior mentality, never quit, stay in the fight. So I'm trying everything I can to think of. I'm just trying to stay present in that moment. I remember looking out into my hallway and my vision starts going dark, dark purple. Nothing like tunnel vision in the streets where it's hard to focus and things can get kind of blurry. It was more like someone was inking in the background. It was going black on me. And I remember just watching it flutter out. And I remember very vividly going, "Well, shit, this is it." And I looked down my hallway, and in that moment, here I'm a cop, I'm an EMT. I've saved I don't know how many lives personally at this point, and there's not a damn thing I can do to save my own life. I dropped dead right there. My wife rolled me on my back. She started doing compressions on me. I mean, she worked on me for 4.5 minutes before the first officer arrived.
Wow.
So she had to she did phenomenal, man. I can't even get ER docs to think like she did. She even put my feet up on the couch in Trendelenburg, so all the oxygenated blood in my legs had gravity forcing it down to my core. I can't get ER docs to do that shit. She did that in that moment, working on her high school sweetheart. So she stops, opens the front door for the cop, pulls the dog back. The officer responded. He did not have an AED. He comes in, sees me down on the floor, and he starts doing compressions. He took over and does a phenomenal job. He worked on me until about the 9.5 minute mark when fire finally arrived. They show up, drag my body in the living room. They got more room to work. The IO drill me. They start, O2 and start dropping the OPA, all that fun stuff. Cut my favorite Nirvana shirt off. According to the crew, they shocked me multiple times. And when I got back, man, it was like someone had switched the light switch. The pain, man, it's hard to describe. So one, your chest is caved in. It feels like someone hit you with a baseball bat from all the compressions.
I
I
was gonna
could
say, did
taste
they break any ribs?
it's some stress fractures, nothing crazy, but I'd
Okay.
rather have that than be dead.
Yeah, yeah.
So I could taste the blood in my mouth. I could feel on my leg where they drilled the IO in. I could feel all that. My hands and my legs hadn't been oxygenated properly for 16 and a half minutes. So you know that like painful pins and needles when you fall asleep on it? And imagine that on steroids. The worst of all was my head. It felt like someone was taking a sledgehammer in my head with every heartbeat. I was getting that white flash and at the back of the eyeball, shooting pain, like all that. According to my wife and the crew, I sat up and started pushing guys off me. I don't remember that. Like she grabbed me by my face and said, "Don't leave me." I said, "I won't," before I collapsed back. They loaded me up on the gurney. And from that moment, I remember everything about dying, death, and coming back. But the next 5 days are a complete blur. I remember feeling the sway of the gurney and I could hear the firefighters walking on the rocks in my front yard. According to the crew, I was in the back of the ambulance cracking jokes, calling them hose draggers and whatnot. Like I'm still friends with them this day, but the next 5 days in the hospital, I just have glimpses, man. As my brain was resetting from the oxygen deprivation, it was like 10-second Tom. I'd be out, I wake back up, my wife is talking to me, I'm passed back out, I wake up, some of the guys from the SWAT team are there, my chief's in the room. I wake up, I'm sobbing for some reason. I wake back up next time and I'm slow dancing with my wife. And I can smell as they're trying to sponge bath and clean me because when you die and your sweat pours all that crap, open up and dump it out, man. It smells horrific, man. They don't tell you that crap. Like my poor
Wow.
wife was helping do the sponge bath, and my eyes are watering. I'm like, good God. Like, so I mean, that was the next 5 days. The next thing I know, they're telling me that we've run every single test possible on you. There's nothing wrong with your heart. There was no congenital defects. There was no plumbing issues. There was no electrical issues. They had me run through stress tests and calcium checks and, you name it. They even broke my blood down to chromosomic levels looking for genetic mutations, and there was nothing. They're like, your heart's healthy than a horse. So this is going to happen again? We don't know. That's why we're going to put this defibrillator in your chest. If it happens again, it'll shock you immediately. You'll be good to go. I'm like, so I don't need a pacemaker. Like, well, it has a pacemaker function, but it lies dormant unless you need it. But this is a defibrillator, and you get this one lead that goes into your heart. And if you drop again, it shocks you. You're good to go. I'm like, oh shit, that's pretty cool. But because of that medical device, all of a sudden I was pushed aside. I was like, no, you can't come back to work with this defibrillator in your chest. Like, what happens if you get tased? Is your radio going to interfere with that? All this stuff that there was no answers for. I literally had to tase myself, which I don't recommend, but I had to go through all these different trials to go back to the field. And I was successful after 6 months of fighting with command staff and risk management. But that whole thing was a whole other mental health journey too, man. Because at 26 years old, you don't think about anything else, especially when you're a young cop and just
You
as
just
an
want to get
FTO
back.
and defensive
Yeah.
tactics instructor, like you're part of that culture. And we all know we can get shot. We all know that something bad could happen. But when you actually have a medical emergency, how many guys are prepared for that? How many people have the finances to sustain themselves for 6 months to a year while they're out? How many people have got the mental fortitude to not be a part of it anymore, to be told you're never going to be able to put that uniform on again starting today? You can't put that badge back on. Like how I was young, I was immature. My identity was too entwined with what I did. I was like, "This is who I am." That's bullshit. That's
Right,
what you
right.
do. But the young cops don't realize that. They think that this is who I am and this is a part of me. And it's like, no, this is what you do, and you're replaceable. That's the sad fact. But it started a whole other journey, and then becoming a cardiac arrest survivor. Man, there's so many realities that they don't. There's no playbook, there's no resources, there's no pamphlets. You reach out to the cardiac survival groups. Back then, they're like, you want to come share your story and go help sell AEDs and teach CPR programs? No. I want to know how I get back to work. What are my rights? Can they, under the ADA, can my employer do this to me? What side effects is this medication going to cause? I'm having brain fog. I'm having loss of fine motor skills. I'm having these cognitive issues. How long does that last? How long are these headaches going to be here? My wife watched me dead on the floor for 16 minutes. What resources do I have for her? She's the one every time I snore, she thinks I'm going to cardiac arresting and she's hitting me, waking me up in the middle of the night. Like they're the ones that had to live through that while I lay there on the floor. Like all these different things that come to be a cardiac arrest survivor that you get told nothing about, all the extra hoops you have to jump through for stupid things. Like, I got a vasectomy and I'm getting a tooth thing done tomorrow. And they're like, oh, you have to get cardiac clearance. What do you mean? There's nothing wrong with my heart. My teeth have nothing to do with that. My balls have nothing to do with my heart. They're like, well, the anesthesia, you have to make sure this. I just did anesthesia for the vasectomy 6 months ago. What do you mean? Like, why do I have to go? All these different things that happen that you don't ever think about. But the reoccurring factor, like I know you talked to a couple other cardiac arrest survivors that have been shocked multiple times by and saved by their implanted devices. That trauma of living through, like imagine literally being told, yeah, you're gonna die again in the next 6 months. We don't know when, but it's gonna happen. This thing's gonna shock you. It's gonna hurt like hell. Hopefully you're not driving. Hopefully you're not by yourself. Hopefully you're not swimming. Good luck. Like that's a scary thing to have on you, to have death sitting on your shoulder at all times, right? That's not something people think about. Like, oh, you've been raped. It's going to happen again the next year. Don't know when. I don't know who's going to happen. But like, could you imagine being told you're going to get raped a second time? Like it's
No.
that level of trauma. You're literally dying and coming back. You're dealing with something internally in your body that you have no control over, and that feeling of helplessness is what really causes a lot of trauma and neurological issues. But on top of that, the brain damage and the neurological issues that you have to face post incident, the emotional waves, the cardiac depression, all these other things that happen. I was not prepared for at a 20 as a 26-year-old man. I had to really learn as I went, and I kind of that started me. I mean, I'm so grateful that it happened. I mean, I try to earn every single day that I've been blessed with. I know I've been given a second chance. That 1,000 Americans today are going to die from cardiac arrest. They would gladly switch places with me right now if they had the opportunity. I don't take it for granted, man. Neither one of my kids would have been delivered. Like, neither one of my kids would be here right now had I died that day. I delivered both of them. I'm so grateful for every moment with them. So it's a humbling experience, and it definitely put me on this path to starting a nonprofit, helping cops save lives and helping cardiac arrest survivors through their journeys. And it's just it's humbling, man. It's very humbling.
You spoke so well and so articulately about the thought of it happening again, and it's like it's one of those things that I never considered, the mental health aspect of it. Um, I just want to hit you with one last question, leave it on a fun note. If you had a comic superbook power, what would it be?
Oh man, you got to go with Jedi. You got to go with the Jedi trick, man. If I can be able to control things with my mind, telekinesis, be able to change weak-minded thoughts, like man, that'd be where it's at. If I could take the Jedi powers, I'd be all about that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. That's the answer I always give, but I always say I want all of the mental abilities, the ability to like levitate thing, telekinesis, the ability to levitate myself, the ability to tap into other people's minds and just like for their own good, of course, not for evil
Shit, for my
purposes.
good, if I could turn off my own thoughts sometimes and man, be
Yeah,
like, all
just
right, go
and
back
just
to sleep.
silence my own mind, right?
Yeah,
Right.
that would
Just
be awesome, man.
silence. One person said they'd love to just like tap people and instantly make them feel euphoria, feel happy. I'm like, that would be a pretty cool power, but I want all of the powers of the mind.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I like that.
I want them all. I want to be able to set things on fire with my mind. If if the defense so calls for it, yeah.
What's that one from the boys where they with the blood control they can make people's heads explode and all that? You seen that one? You watch the boys?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Love
I
that show.
watched everything about and then they have a prequel now called Gen V.
I just finished that, man. It was good.
It was really good. That's gonna spin off into its own show. And I love that whole series, that concept of people being given superpowers through a serum.
Yeah, it's
It's
got our humor, man. It's got cop humor all over it,
it
man. That
really
dark humor,
does.
that twisted stuff. You're like, all right, this is the reality. If people really had powers, you'd see a lot more of this stuff.
Yes, 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 because it shows the flaws of people and like not everyone's going to be good and use it to society's benefit. There's a crazy episode that I won't get into, but where the guy gets really tiny.
Oh yeah,
Oh my God. It's so
yeah.
twisted and so dark.
But
It's
you're like,
like,
that's where people would go with it if they had powers, man. There's not everyone's got the same morals. Not everyone's got the same kinks. You know, you watch it, it's like, oh man, I didn't even think about stuff like that. Like, who are these writers?
Yeah. Hey man, I look forward to continuing the conversation in person, and yeah, we'll definitely do it again. We got to do a part two, but I want to.
Yeah, I can talk to you all day, man. We didn't even scratch the surface.
I know you got a lot more to share, but in the interest of not making this episode too long, I'm gonna cut it here and respect your time. I really appreciate you coming on. All right, family. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Everyone I interview, I've chosen for you guys because of their story, and I hope that you get some value every single time. If you did get value or just simply enjoyed the episode, please share the episode with someone that you know. If you know of a guest, a frontline hero that has an amazing story, something uplifting or a positive message, hit me up in the contact form of www.davidleith.com or DM me at Instagram at davidleith1. Subscribe to the show because I have some really phenomenal guests coming up in the next few weeks that you definitely don't want to miss. All right, one.